appropriate actions. Welcome to Lunchtime Agenda. I'm David Lipson. We will try and get to that issue with our panel today, but I want to start with jobs, and it was mentioned just at the end there at the National Press Club because there are claims that the labour market is on the mend, with almost 50,000 new jobs created in the previous month, according to the latest ABS data. But with unemployment still at 6%, the Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, says it's still too high.
Well, I certainly take this as an important spur to further economic reform. Plainly, unemployment at 6% is much higher than we would like it. And plainly, if we want to see more people employed, we've got to get taxes down, we've got to get regulation down.
Although Labor supports the job creation over the past month, it says Tony Abbott is already missing his target of 1 million new jobs within 5 years.
The Abbott government, before the election, promised there would be 1 million jobs additionally created in 5 years. On average, 100,000 jobs each 6 months. In fact, it is 65,000 jobs short of what it promised before the election.
And the days before any election are always fruitful when it comes to announcements on job-creating projects, and it seems South Australia and Tasmania are no different. The Prime Minister is in Adelaide today, where he announced that unmanned drones will be purchased and based in Adelaide, something that is expected to funnel about $100 million into the state.
This is essentially a defence announcement, not a regional assistance announcement, but nevertheless, when we do have enhanced defence equipment, where we do have enhanced defence capabilities, there are inevitably and always economic spin-offs for the area that's hosting them.
We'll have more on the South Australian and Tasmanian elections a little later in the program, but let's now bring in our panel. Labor MP Kelvin Thomson and Liberal MP Alex Hawke. Thank you both for joining us this afternoon on Lunchtime Agenda. I want to start with jobs, and to you, Alex Hawke. Have we turned a corner, Alex Hawke, when it comes to the labour market?
Well, look, this is welcome news today that we've seen stronger labour market figures, but of course there is still a great big job to be done in terms of our economy. We've seen a lot of economic restructuring going on in particular sectors, some job losses which are very disappointing, and without further economic reform, the government is saying, you know, the labour market could remain volatile. So we have a reform program, a deregulation program from the national level that we believe will allow the economy to continue to grow and grow even stronger than it is now. So what you'll find is, of course, that with the carbon tax removed, the mining tax removed, a lot of the deregulation agenda the government put in place over the course of the next 3 years, employers will have the ability to create more jobs and employ more people, and that's what we want to see.
Is the coalition claiming any credit for these jobs that have been created? Because, as you mentioned, those big ticket items haven't been passed yet, getting rid of the carbon tax, the mining tax and other structural reforms.
Well, no, we do welcome the renewed confidence in the economy. I think that's been a very important feature of what could be a good turnaround for our national economy. There was a lack of confidence in the past year, coming out of government in particular, with a lack of coherent decision-making and an erratic approach to government. We have certainty and stability restored from the national government level, and of course now it's time to implement those key election promises and let Labor and the Greens allow us to implement the mandate that we have from the Australian people to lower taxes and provide less regulation so that businesses can employ more people, and that's absolutely what the agenda will be pursuing.
Kelvin Thomson, there has been a lot of doom and gloom when it comes to jobs, and with a particular focus in your state of Victoria as well, with recent announcements from the auto industry and Qantas to an extent as well. But clearly other industries seem to be being created here, according to these jobs figures.
Well, David, I'm very concerned about the job figures. We see today that unemployment has increased by over 10,000 to over 740,000 people. that the aggregate number of hours worked has declined by nearly 1%. And as you mentioned, I'm a Victorian. Our unemployment at 6.4% is the highest it's been since 2002, and our participation rate has declined from 64.8% to 64.5%. So I think we have a very difficult picture, particularly in Victoria. Just to my north, the suburb of Broadmeadows has seen its unemployment rise up to over 12%, by some 25% in the 6 months since the change of government. So we have thousands of workers in a suburb like Broadmeadows who are out of work and at risk of long-term unemployment.
But at that same time, we are seeing more than 47,000 jobs created, and that's full-time positions as well, just in the past month.
Yes, but as I said before, the aggregate number of hours being worked has declined by 1%, and this 6% unemployment figure represents a much higher figure than we had at the time of the change of government, and is certainly way too high. The Prime Minister is right to say that 6% unemployment is too high, and we need to take steps to make sure that people who are out of work have the opportunity to get jobs. And against that background, I think it's crazy to learn, as we did yesterday, that the federal government is uncapping those temporary migrant worker programs, the 457 visas. They are a dagger at the heart of ordinary Australians being able to get a job, and those visa programs should be wound back rather than being expanded as they are.
I'll get a response to that before I move on to infrastructure. Alex Hawke, just on 457 visas.
Yeah, well, look, I don't agree with Kelvin on this issue. Of course, Labor is trying to say that these 457 arrangements are taking on jobs that local people want. Well, the inherent criteria in the 457 program is that these are jobs that can't be filled and skills that can't be matched currently by Australians. And there's no doubt there are sectors of our economy which are growing and moving fast where there aren't available Australian workers, or we haven't got a system which encourages it. And I know that Minister Andrews is looking at this question quite closely in terms of making sure job seekers have to, who are on the dole, have to go further than the mandated system of kilometres within a city to go and accept a job. But while we have shortages and labour shortages in particular sectors, whether that be in fruit picking or other areas, we've got to have our economy meet the demands that it needs. And if Australians won't do the work or can't do the work, then there's nothing wrong with bringing in people to come and work here and pay tax and contribute to the economy. It works pretty well, and it isn't the cause of unemployment.
Okay, well, I want to move on to infrastructure, and of course all governments do invest in infrastructure partly as a job-creating measure. Jamie Briggs, the Assistant Minister for Infrastructure, spoke this morning about the Productivity Commission's draft review, which is recommending more toll roads around Australia. This is Jamie Briggs.
Well, motorists do pay for every kilometre they drive at the moment. You pay through registration charges at the state level, you pay through fuel taxes, and you pay in some cities through tolls. So there are user charges at the moment. There are a range of them.
Kelvin Thomson, the Prime Minister today ruled out one of the suggestions from the Productivity Commission review, that is a pay per kilometre driver system where a GPS is in each car. But are toll roads, more of them, the way to go?
Well, I think it's very unfortunate that motorists have been experiencing toll roads or for that matter, pay per kilometre. These are not things that we should be proceeding with. It's regrettable that infrastructure costs have been rising as rapidly as they have been, but city infrastructure costs are a function of city population growth. So my home city of Melbourne has been increasing by 200 people a day, 1,500 people a week, 75,000 a year, and that drives a great deal of infrastructure need. If we didn't have that level of population growth, it would be much easier for us to meet our infrastructure requirements, and you wouldn't see the infrastructure shortages that give rise to people saying, oh well, if only we could tax motorists more.
Is it appropriate, Alex Hawke, to tax motorists more, as Kelvin put it there?
Well, look, the Prime Minister's ruled out this pay per kilometre idea, but this PwC report's a very good a good report which shows that you do have to have private capital involved in infrastructure. There's huge infrastructure shortfalls in our cities all around Australia, and I come from Sydney, where my electorate in particular pays a lot of tolls to get to and from the city, but other parts of Sydney don't, purely because of the past politics of state governments. Now, everybody needs to shoulder the burden. We do collect about $18 billion in terms of taxes, just specifically for infrastructure. And this report is about how to spend that infrastructure money better so that we can ensure that we do get better infrastructure in conjunction with the private sector. And the old thinking that government will just do our infrastructure is really long dead. And I think people do need to accept more user pays, but we're not looking at things like per kilometre tolling and things like that. We just need to recognise that we have a huge shortfall that no government will ever be able to meet, and we need to encourage as much private sector capital into the infrastructure space as possible.
Well, speaking of a huge shortfall, the government's proposed paid parental leave scheme, and the former Treasurer Peter Costello has reportedly advised the current Treasurer Joe Hockey not to proceed with the paid parental leave scheme because it's too expensive when the government is looking towards structural savings. Now, the Prime Minister suggested this morning, or at least was open to the suggestion, that the current PPL might need negotiation in order to get through the Senate. This was Tony Abbott speaking on Adelaide Radio this morning.
Well, obviously it's got to go through the Parliament, and sometimes things have to be negotiated through the Parliament. But as far as I'm concerned, the scheme that we took to the election is the scheme that we should take into the Parliament and try our hardest to get passed. And I regard this as an economic reform, not as just a welfare benefit.
Alex Hawke, have you noticed increasing angst in coalition ranks when it comes to the paid parental leave scheme?
No, look, I think people are waiting. I mean, this has been the subject of the Commission of Audit report. Obviously, you know, I haven't seen the Commission of Audit report. Other people haven't either. There's been some reporting out there, but we'll see what the Commission of Audit has to say about it. And I think the Prime Minister is right. I mean, obviously, this has to be negotiated through the Senate if it is to get through. And obviously, there's been some clear positions put by minor parties and the Greens and others in relation to amendments to the proposal by the government.
Would those sorts of amendments, though, actually save the government much? Because, as I understand it, shifting the cap from $150,000 salary to $100,000 salary wouldn't actually save that much. Is that enough to satisfy you? You've been a vocal opponent to this scheme.
Yeah, look, I've expressed some views about it. I think any savings in the current budgetary environment would be welcome. Whatever that size of those would be, I think they would be welcome. Also, improvements to the equity would be welcome as well. So, you know, I'd welcome those changes to any proposed scheme.
But is it enough?
Say again?
Is it enough, though?
Well, that'll be up to the minor parties in the Senate.
Okay. Kelvin Thomson, just on the paid parental leave scheme, at this time, what's your view on it and the prospect of actual negotiations with the Greens to actually get it through Parliament?
Well, David, I think that Peter Costello and Alex Hawke and others who've criticised the paid parental leave scheme are right. The fact is that it's an all-singing, all-dancing age of entitlements extravaganza, $5.5 billion annual bill, and if we're talking about budget repair and balancing the books, the government would be well advised to jettison it and stick with the paid parental leave scheme which Labor introduced and which is benefiting hundreds of thousands of Australian families.
Okay, we've got to take a quick break, but we will be back with more right after this, so stay with us.
I can't think of one good reason why my family should be left to pay for my funeral. But I don't have thousands of dollars set aside to cover the costs. That's why Seniors Final Expenses Insurance from Australian Seniors Insurance Agency was perfect. Now I have certainty knowing that my family is guaranteed a quick cash payment of up to $15,000, which is usually paid within 1 business day of a claim being made, and the benefit triples if death is accidental. Australian seniors are the over 50s insurance specialists, so they guarantee acceptance for all Aussies like me up to age 79 without a medical or health check.
I simply chose the benefit my family would need and could even pay my premium fortnightly or monthly on the day of my choice, all at no extra cost. I hardly notice the cost, which for me works out to be $6.14 a week. And they even gave me a 30-day money-back guarantee.
Seniors Final Expenses Insurance was an easy choice.
Cover your final expenses today. Call 1300 710 843 or visit finalexpensesinsurance.com.au. You'll even get a free will kit.
That doesn't look like mommy, mommy, mommy doesn't never swagger like that. That doesn't look like mommy, mommy, mommy doesn't never swagger. She don't have a swagger.
Now with your mobile, you can tap and pay. Only with CommBank you can.
What I know now is I can lose weight and keep it off.
Thousands of people have learnt things they never knew about nutrition, exercise and themselves with my 12-week body transformation. Sign-ups are closing soon. Visit 12wbt.com and join now.
You don't have to wait until the planets align to improve your super balance. IOOF, specialists in superannuation, investments and trustee services. To find out more, speak with your financial advisor today.
However ambitious your plans for your dream home, we want to help make them a reality. And an HSBC home loan could be just the thing to get you there sooner. Find out more today at hsbc.com.au/dreamhome.
Thanks for your company on Lunchtime Agenda. Still with me here is Alex Hawke and Kelvin Thomson. I want to just talk to some other matters that have been raised over the last 24 hours. One of them is the mining tax, and Bill Shorten suggesting on Sky News yesterday, Kelvin Thomson, that Labor may have to reconsider its position for the next election when it comes to the mining tax. Why not just support the repeal of it, though, when it goes through the Senate?
Well, we've made it very clear that we believe that there does need to be resource rent taxation, and that's a consistent position that Bill and the opposition have had both before the election and now. It's true that there may be developments in the Parliament that cause us and everybody else to look at this issue afresh. I think myself that we should be taking a leaf out of Norway's book. They are, like us, a resource-rich nation. But they had the wisdom, admittedly over 20 years ago now, to set up a sovereign wealth fund, and my recollection is that that fund has about $900 billion in it now, about 1% of the world's stocks and bonds. And as a consequence of that, they've got lots of manufacturing industry, something like 30% of their workforce in manufacturing. Instead of having a current account deficit as we have, they've got a current account surplus, and their unemployment is 3.3%, where ours is 6%. So I think we can learn from others, and I think that we can do things better.
But that's where the money goes once it's raised. Right now, because of the deductions that mining companies are able to make, the mining tax is just bringing in a fraction of what it was expected to. Just under 10%, I think, is the figure. So do you believe that the actual structure, the makeup of the way that the resources are taxed at the moment does need to be changed in the future?
Well, it's a profits-based tax, so it will come and go in accordance with industry profits. But we said before the election that we would support the tax that we had introduced, and we will support that in the Parliament, and so we should. Further on down the road, there will be parliamentary processes, and we can have a look at what develops then, as we should.
Okay, Ken Henry has also spoken to a number of other matters, more broadly on revenue, on the budget and the like, and he has essentially said that we can't afford some of the big reforms that have been promised, like the National Disabilities Insurance Scheme, like the Gonski School Reform Program, without increasing the tax take. So, Alex Hawke, what happens? Do we increase the tax take, or do we have to cut back on some of these big spending promises that have been made?
Yeah, well, absolutely. There is a structural deficit problem, and I know the Treasurer is working very hard on the budget and coming up with structural solutions to the structural expenditure problems. And obviously we have to reduce expenditure over time and in an appropriate way, and also protect the revenue base as well. So I know the Commission of Audit is about recommending some of those things that can help with this process, and the government has an interim report on this, and the Treasurer is working very hard on the budget as well.
So which one would you rather see the Treasurer go? Which direction? In increasing the tax take or cutting back on some of those programs?
Well, I think the government's been speaking very frankly with the Australian people since it's been elected, and also in our election commitments about the need for reduced expenditure in so many areas, and making sure we spend money wisely, unlike the approach of the previous government. Let's take the NBN, for example, where there was no cost-benefit analysis, and this Productivity Commission report has told us that, you know, we really needed to have a cost-benefit analysis, which would have ensured spending was done wisely. So we're going to spend those taxpayer dollars we do have better and reduce expenditure as well, so that we can meet the growing needs of the Australian people.
Kelvin Thomson, we don't have long left, but I will get you to respond. How should we pay for these big ticket items? Remembering too that the voters have said that they don't want a carbon price and they don't want a mining tax.
Well, nevertheless, David, the government can hardly say that the budget's in a difficult position and then make things worse by saying we're going to get rid of the carbon price and we're going to get rid of the mining tax, and into the bargain we're going to introduce a $5.5 billion paid parental leave scheme. If you take the opposition's position in relation to those things, you're much better placed in terms of balancing the books. The other thing that Ken Henry said that I thought was worthy of note was the reference to John Howard's family payments. The last time I looked, they were $17 billion. I think they must be $20 billion by now, and there are aspects of those family payments, like the large family supplement, which is extra money for families choosing to have 3 and more children, which frankly I think if we're looking at repairing the budget or we're looking at paying for the disability insurance scheme, are of a lower priority.
Okay, we're out of time. Kelvin Thomson, Alex Hawke, thank you both very much for your thoughts today. And as you can see on your screen, some breaking